Hello, my most beloved and murderous horde, and welcome back. I am your Mistress of Murder Lady Kempo, and today's video is going to be different. And I know I say that with a lot of my videos, but this one is neither going to be a creepypasta, nor is it true crime. In the spirit of Halloween, and as an added bonus, you will be getting another video on Halloween, which will be my true crime video of the month. I have decided to go over the top 13 creepiest urban myths in the United States. So, shall we begin? You know the drill by now, my lovelies. Pick your poison, sit back, relax, and let's have ourselves a little conversation. Our first urban myth of the evening is known as the Devil's Toy Box and comes to us from Louisiana. Now, this urban legend will be recognized by our savvier horror fans as the inspiration for the infamous Hellraiser series, though in reality, this particular urban legend has nothing to do with a box or even a toy, but rather a small room where the floor, ceiling, and 4 walls are all comprised of one giant mirror. Now, according to the legend, if you stand inside this mirror room alone for too long, supposedly the devil would show up and steal your soul. In most variations of this story, he did so by flaying you alive. The story is popular enough to have actually had its own annual horror attraction and haunted house that went up every October. However, the attraction has since closed and was formerly called the Farmer Graves Haunted Orchard in the years it ran. Unfortunately, it was about as thrilling as the name suggested, which is to say not very. So, on Halloween for 2014, the owners of this haunted orchard decided to spice things up by building a few new interactive installations, of which included the windowless shack called the Devil's Toy Box. The shack housed a small room, as I said, comprised of large wall-sized mirrors. The farmer's graves, however, closed less than a week after opening that same year, as a result for the numerous people who had to be hospitalized after going inside the Devil's Toy Box attraction. Now, apparently, no one could last longer than 5 minutes inside the room. There was even a large timer set up beside the building that showed the current occupant's length of stay under a second clock displaying the longest recorded time up to that point, which was maxed out at 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the attraction was finally closed. The man who managed to last that long went by the name of Roger Hertz, age 52 and father of 3, who had been, at the time, a very normal and completely sane man, was reduced afterwards to a wide-eyed mute, and to this day he still hasn't said a word. Number 2 comes to us from Alabama and is known as the Dead Children's Playground. Now, this eerie playground adjacent to Maple Hill, which is Huntsville's oldest cemetery, doesn't just have an eerie nickname for fun. The playground was presumably designed to entertain the children while their parents visited the graves of loved ones. Now, legend has it, though, that the spirits of the children who were buried there in the cemetery since the first grave was dug in 1822 come out to play at night. The living have observed orbs of light going down the slide, seen swings moving on their own, and have even heard giggling. Creepier still, some say the spirits include victims of a rash of child murders that happened in the 60s when bodies were rumored to have been found in the area that now houses the playground. Now, the playground itself wasn't opened until 1985. So you can imagine how much pent-up energy those tiny spirits had after 163 years without a slide or really anything. In 2007, the city actually tried to level the park to make room for more graves, and even remove the slides and swings overnight. although after some public outcry, they were replaced with more modern equipment, making it ever so slightly less creepy to look at, but also probably resulting in some much happier ghosts. Number 3 comes to us from Arkansas and is known as the Dog Boy. Now, the name of this urban myth sounds kind of goofy, but if you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of the minuscule Arkansas town of Quitman, you won't be laughing if you suddenly see the hulking outline of a 300-pound half-man, half-beast, complete with glowing animal eyes, glaring out of the windows of this house. I would suggest you walk quickly, as he has been known to chase people down his street, biting at their heels, kind of like a dog actually. Now, this actually is one of the rare urban legends where the story behind the story ends up being even creepier than the folklore. Now, Gerald Bedditz, the only son of the Bedditz family of 65 Mulberry, was always known to be a problem child, but not in the cute Junior Healy way. Bedditz would collect and torture animals, hence the Dog Boy moniker, before turning his sociopathic focus on his elderly parents, allegedly imprisoning them in their own home and potentially even murdering his own father. Eventually, Bedditz would be imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Number 4 comes to us from Arizona and is known as the Skinwalkers. Now, it's pretty easy to feel unsettled while driving through the desolate desert roads of Arizona, especially at night, and particularly so when you hear a short burst of taps on your window while cruising at about 60 miles per hour, only to turn and see a shape-shifting, mutilated, half-human creature responsible for the high-speed interruption. But, just relax. It's only looking to, rip the flesh off your bones. Now, this legend is so ingrained in Arizona culture that when a Navajo woman was found brutally murdered in Flagstaff, the accused killer's defense in court was that the attack could have only been perpetrated by a skinwalker, therefore making this man innocent. There is even a defined and well-documented portion of the state known as Skinwalker Ranch, where you are most likely to see one of these creatures. Not that you'd actually want to. Now, the Skinwalkers, like so many ancient American urban legends, have roots in Native American folklore. Now, while it's fairly hard to gather specific details, as speaking of potentially sinister legends is a serious taboo in Navajo culture, it is understood that what non-Navajos refer to as skinwalkers are witch doctors who have become evil reflections of everything the Navajo Nation values. Basically, they are men who've transformed into malevolent, murderous creatures that have no qualms using their spiritual powers to kill. You see, Navajo medicine men are trained to learn both the good and evil aspects of their powers, and skinwalkers are those who have turned to the quote-unquote dark side. Very Star Warsy, and frankly, quite terrifying. Number 5 comes to us from Illinois and is known as the Italian Bride. Now, an elaborate marble statue of a woman in a wedding dress is bound to stand out in a cemetery as it is, but that's not what's driven the Italian Bride to be the subject of local fascination. Upon closer inspection, you will find that there is an actual photo plaque on the gravesite of a woman in a casket looking perfectly preserved, even though, as an inscription notes, the photo was taken 6 years after her burial and when the body was exhumed. Now, reports of this unusual activity cover from everything to the smell of fresh flowers near the gravesite in the dead of winter to the ghostly figure of a woman in white roaming the cemetery or even the halls of a nearby high school in the dead of night. Now, in 1921, recently married Julia Bacolia Petta died in childbirth and was buried in her wedding gown. Legend has it that her mother immediately began experiencing nightmares that Julia was demanding her grave be reopened. The source of the distress varies depending on the storyteller, often relating to some sort of discontent with Julia's new husband. But what isn't a dispute is that 6 years later, the mother finally got her wish, and Julia's pristine condition inspired her to raise funds for the statue that's been creeping out generations of locals in Illinois ever since. Number 6 is from Massachusetts and is the Curse of Giles Corey. Now, the Salem witch trials were creepy enough to begin with, if any of you remember reading The Crucible in high school. I suggest you go reread it if you don't believe me. But the story of Giles Corey, who was slowly pressed to death under a series of progressively heavier rocks in an effort to extract a confession, is particularly unsettling. Now, historically, I would like to say that the reason Giles Corey was pressed to death and not hung like the other 19 victims of the Salem witch trials is because Giles Corey took on the defense, so to speak, of being a standing mute, which means he refused to plead guilty or not guilty. Now, where the legend has, he actually uttered a curse against Salem right before his dying breath, and honestly, you can kind of understand why he would have some ill will towards the city. Again, historically, in fact, his final words were recorded as being "more weight" when asked the question if he was ready to give his testimony of guilty or not guilty. Now, for generations, his apparition has allegedly appeared in the cemetery before something terrible is about to happen, including the 1914 fire that burned down a sizable portion of the city, and not only that, but a series of tragedies that have hit the Salem Sheriff's Office starting in about 1696 with a heart attack that killed George Corwin 4 years after he presided over the trials. Number 7 is from Michigan and is known as Hell's Bridge. Now, the other different urban myths, the Nan Rogue and the Dogmen, they really have nothing on the tale of Elis Frisk, a deranged old preacher who, according to blood-curdling lore, basically Pied Pipered a group of tethered children into the woods near what is now Algoma Township. He slaughtered them one by one, casting them into Cedar Creek before being caught by their parents and hanged, but not before saying he was, of course, possessed by demons. I do hate cliches, but that's how the legend goes. In its current form, Hell's Bridge is a creaky, narrow metal footbridge in the middle of the woods, where those brave enough to cross it at night claim to hear the voices and screams of children, and are sometimes greeted by a black figure with glowing eyes as they traverse it. Now, there is no record of this man in the area, though there is a prominent Frisk family beginning in the 1910s. Still, despite the lack of hard facts, anyone who has visited the bridge will attest that there is something out there, and it usually makes its presence known as you're teetering on the shaky metal bridge in the moonlight. Number 8 is from Mississippi and is known as the Three-Legged Lady of Nash Road. Now, whenever a strange person starts chasing your car as you drive down a dark, unfamiliar road, it's pretty unsettling. When she bangs on the hood of your car, however, it's even worse. But when you then realize she has 3 legs, one seeming to be a rotting limb that she has sewn to her body, that's just about the worst it can possibly be. However, that's what generations of Mississippians have said about the stretch of Nash Road near Columbus, where the lady, quite literally, does her thing. Now, from Robert Johnson selling his soul to Yowzo, witch, many ghost stories in Mississippi persist. But the Three-Legged Lady gets points for changing to suit what scares you most. Some say that the extra leg was removed from a dead lover and attached to her body. Some believe that she's the ghost of a mother who got lost searching for her dismembered daughter after all she could find was a severed leg. Some say that she just wants to race you across the nearby bridge. Either way, turn off your headlights on this stretch of road and don't be surprised if you're forced to confront the specter yourself. Number 9 is from Missouri and is known as Zombie Road. Now, this dark canopied trail running through Wildwood, Missouri, just outside St. Louis, has been a hotbed of creepy tales for ages, often revolving around shadowy human figures following and frightening those along the trail. Now, originally, this bridge was built as an access road for the gravel quarries along the Merrimack River. Now, the road fell into disuse and disrepair in the 70s and saw an increase in teenagers flocking to the area to party and just, scare the crap out of each other. However, the origin stories of the trail's haunting varies greatly, from the kind of plausible railroad accidents, executed civil war spies, yada yada, to the more sensational sadistic children's hospitals, etc. Now, several years ago, it was paved so it might be used as a bike path, but that hasn't done much to slow down the legend. The police, however, are doing their best. Number 10 is from Montana and is known as the Hitchhiker of Black Horse Lake. Now, usually when you see a hitchhiker on a particularly desolate stretch of highway, which Highway 87 certainly can be called, it will give you the willies. On this particular stretch of road near Great Falls, it's compounded by the fact that the namesake lake is actually seasonal and is dry most of the year. Regardless, the end result of the body of a Native American man clad in jeans with jet black hair slamming into your windshield as you're driving is sheer terror. Legend has it those who encounter the hitchhiker suddenly find his body bouncing off the front of their car. When they stop to help, there's nothing there, and there's no damage to their windshield. Well, at least he'd consider it. The hitchhiker, meanwhile, repeats the cycle, endlessly trapped in his own personal hell as he repeats his moments of death, with, whichever driver happens to be unlucky enough to be cruising down the road at the wrong time. Now, folklorists have traced this whole vanishing hitchhiker phenomenon back to the 19th century, though given by the presence of denim reported by most who encounter the hitchhiker, they're pretty much guessing that he was meeting his demise in the late 60s, if he was real at all. Now, legends of wandering spirits of Native Americans are pretty prevalent in this part of the country as well, so chances are the hitchhiker lore and the Native American aspect of it just kind of melted together logically. Number 11 is from New Jersey and is known as the Watcher. Now, let's be real for a second. The average New Jersey Devils fanboy is a bit scarier than the legend of the Jersey Devil that most of you should be familiar with. But the Watcher is a legend all its own and is actually quite recent. It actually creeped its way into viral fame in 2015 and is like a David Fincher movie breathed into horrifying life. If you don't know the details, in the summer of 2015, a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. Soon after, they started getting letters signed by someone IDing themselves as the Watcher, claiming it was his duty to watch over the house, while also writing some rather disturbing letters. 3 creepy letters to the now new owners telling them his grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, his father watched the house in the 60s, and now it was his turn to, of course, watch the house. But because of all this, the new owners filed a lawsuit against the older owners because they, the old owners, did not disclose the fact that there was a stalker. The first letter, delivered on June 5th, states exactly what I said, that his grandfather had watched the house, his father had watched the house, and now it was his turn. It also read, according to the complaint, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. The second and third letter states, "Have they found what's in the walls yet? In time they will. I'm pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. Will the young bloods play in the basement?" The young bloods referring to their children. "Who has the bedroom facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me know better who is in which room, then I can plan." In one letter, reportedly, he said that the home's windows and doors allow me to watch and track you as you move throughout the house. Who am I? It read. I'm the Watcher. The letters also stated, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them out to me." Now, presumably in the first letter, he also states that he ran from room to room imagining the life with the rich occupants there. Also, "And now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again." Needless to say, no one ever moves in and puts it up for sale very soon after purchasing this house. It is still up for sale to this day. Number 12 is from New York and is known as the Montauk Project. And as a first warning, conspiracy theory alert. Now, this particular project is a series of alleged government experiments conducted in Montauk, Long Island in the early 80s. Reportedly served as one of the Duffer Brothers' main inspiration for the TV show Stranger Things. So, we're talking about psychological warfare, experimenting on children, opening portals to other dimensions, and other nefarious government-funded creepiness. Now, where it actually came from, there were rumors already circulating around the shady government activities in the southeastern tip of Long Island for nearly a decade prior. The legend wasn't even fully baked until the early 1900s, when Peter B. Nicholas, a pharmapsychologist and an electrical engineer, helped pen the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, which detailed a slew of salacious, repressed memories from his day working in Montauk, combined by other colleagues. The book details time warps to Mars, genetic experiments, and even 11-esque psychic child spies. Now, the Montauk Project itself is said to be a piece of a larger psychological warfare conspiracy called the Philadelphia Experiment, which naturally has inspired its own film too. And number 13, our final urban myth of this evening, comes to us from Pennsylvania and is known as Charlie No-Face. Now, according to legend, after a tragic childhood accident, Charlie No-Face, aka the Glowing Green Man, lost his face and turned radioactive, quite literally glowing a toxic green as he stalks the western Pennsylvania highways at night. His main haunt is Piney Fork Tunnel, an abandoned freight tunnel in Hillsville. But if you see him out, keep your foot on the accelerator, as he even manages to touch your car. It just might stall out, and then you'll be hanging out with Charlie No-Face for the rest of your probably short life. Now, Ray Robbins was actually the real-life person behind this myth, and as a child in 1919, he was severely electrocuted by a trolley wire while peering into a bird's nest, which practically melted and disfigured his face. As an adult, Robinson walked western Pennsylvania highways, Route 351 to be exact, but only at night, as his shocking visage gained him a lot of unwanted attention. His glowing appearance is likely due to the petroleum jelly he needed to coat his damaged skin with in order to keep it from getting infected and from causing him pain. Those who knew him claim that he was an incredibly sweet, though profoundly isolated man. And no, he has nothing to do with Pennsylvania's other Green Man. And that, my most beloved murderous horde, is all the time I have for you for this video. I do so hope you enjoyed your pre-Halloween treat. do be on the lookout for my true crime video of the month, which will be uploaded on October 31st, this Wednesday. And I shall see you all very soon. Until next time, my lovelies, remember, haunting dreams and blessed be.